What's going on, people? Welcome back to the channel. Welcome back to listening to me rant about whatever. Though we haven't really got to the whatever part. I've mostly been focusing on Islam, but I kind of just wanted to establish that before I start talking about conspiracies, I also want to talk about how I'm going to start doing interviews. The plan is to do one interview a day. They'll be about 30 minutes, maybe more, in length. And I'm going to interview Muslims. And I'm gonna basically ask them, I'm gonna have some questions for converts and some questions for born Muslims, like, for the converts, I'll get their how they became Muslim story. Um, and I'll ask them, like, what was the idea is to find out why people study Islam. So for converts, how did they become Muslim? What drew them to the Islamic knowledge? Um, how did it affect the people around them? And similar for born Muslims, right? When did they start taking the Islamic knowledge more seriously? When did they start learning it? When did they, when they started implementing it? How did it affect their life and the people around them? And that's basically what I kind of want to get out of it. And then I might have one or two, special questions depending on the individual because, people are special, right? Like everybody has a different situation. Like the first guy I want to get, he's as a friend. He moved from Gambia to Russia, so I'm going to ask him about that, right? Another woman I want to interview was a lawyer, and so I want to ask her how that went. Like, what was that about? Like, what was in reference to Islam? Like, how did things work out? How did what kind of Islamic questions did she have to figure out before she did that, and so on and so forth. And I have several such people lined up who have agreed. So hopefully for the next couple of weeks I'll have interviews I can put up. Anyways, conspiracies. Oh boy, conspiracies. Let's see, do I actually want to... What is a conspiracy? Let's look this up. An agreement to perform together an illegal, wrongful, or subversive act, a group of conspirators, an agreement between two people or more persons to commit a crime, blah, 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 blah. Yeah, I think we know what a conspiracy is. Bunch of people controlling the world, allegedly. That's what I'm talking about. This idea that there is some group out there who's controlling or even influencing the world. And how I used to think that was the case, but I don't anymore. I used to think that because there were so many things that seem to go in a very... There are so many things in society that seem to go in a very directed way. Like a lot of things where it's like, this happened, oh, well, then this other thing's going to happen. Oh, well, now that other thing happened, but if those happen, then this... Oh, well, no, yep, it happened. All right, now look at that. Oh, here it comes. Oh, and now that thing happened. Right? And so it's like, there must be some kind of logic to this. Like, things aren't just randomly happening. They're specifically happening in a specific way. And, that was my 9-year-old brain. As I got older, a lot of those ideas kind of fell off. Now, they didn't fall off because I don't think there are, bad people trying to, be subversive and destroy society. No, that's real. That's an actual thing. It fell off because the idea that you need a group of people to come together to get the result that you have is incorrect. You don't need a group of people. It doesn't require... I'm moving my microphone. It doesn't require a group of people. For a pretty simple reason. I've been working on a theory, if you will, about how people kind of work. It's got several components. I'm not really done working on it. But among them is this idea that if you give, let's say you had, 10 groups of people, and each group has 100 people, and then you come up with a very simple directive for all of those for all 10 of those groups to follow. Let's say the directive is everybody needs to wear blue shirts. That's the directive. If given enough time, each of those groups, in trying to get everybody to wear blue shirts, they will come up with the same strategies to do so. Right? We're assuming that they have, they all have the same level of resources, the same IQ, the same intelligence, all of that, right? All things being equal, they will come up with the same strategy for selling or for getting everybody to wear blue shirts. Even if they're not communicating with each other. These 10 groups, they're not communicating with each other at all. They will come up with the same strategy to get everybody to sell blue, or to get everybody into blue shirts, which would include selling them. So it would be natural. You have these 10 groups. Eventually, each one will come up with the idea of selling blue shirts. Each one of them would come up with a, science or whatever the equivalent is of why blue is a good color. They would come up with ways of explaining why shirts are good to wear. They would come up with ways of explaining why red shirts are they have an issue, like you shouldn't wear red shirts. They would come up with ways of explaining why having no shirt is not good for you. And they would do all of this organically. Because I believe there is a most efficient way to get everybody in blue shirts. And humans typically pick the most efficient way. Usually if they don't, it's because they're ignorant or something about, some reality. But in this assumption, we're going to assume everybody has the same knowledge, right? So this hypothetical most efficient way to get everybody into blue shirts would eventually show itself in all 10 groups. And so what this means is, if you want to put an idea in society, if you want to change society towards a certain thing, right? You have a certain result that you want society to have. But it requires a lot of steps and a lot of changes to get there. Then what you would do is you would need to find that one basic principle, that one basic idea, that if everybody tried to implement it, it would naturally lead to the result that you want. Right? So you don't tell people you want a particular result. I did in the example because, it is what it is. But You just put in people an idea, and they will implement it in basically the same way themselves wherever they are. An easy example is the idea that love is love, or the idea that as long as they're not hurting anybody, I don't care what they do. Or you know, everyone should be free. Right? These are really basic ideas, and they sound really good to a lot of people. But in the process of implementing them, it requires things happen that would give a certain effect on society. And so if somebody was malicious and they wanted to, destroy the family, for example, they wouldn't need to come up with a whole bunch of different ways to destroy the family. They could just come up with the idea of men and women are equal. And then in the attempt to implement that idea, things would naturally occur that have a result of disrupting the family. Like feminism, for example. All of the Roe v. Wade stuff going on. These are disruptive factors. You don't need some group to sit there and go, okay, first we're going to implement this, and then we're going to start this organization, and then we're going to do this, and then we're going to do that, and then we're going to do this, and then we're going to do that. It's not required. You just need the seed. You need to plant the seed, and it'll grow by itself. And it'll grow in the way that you want it to grow. Assuming, you pick the right seed, right? Because humans in general are efficient, and they will take the most efficient path, which means that they will all come to the same conclusions on how to implement a particular idea. So yeah, there's no Illuminati. Now, that's not to say there aren't elites, if you will, or Elon Musk exists, right? Putin exists. Biden exists. And these different actors, they do things to try to get what they want. But they don't work together. They're not. The more elite you become, the more everybody else is your enemy. These people aren't working together. Like they're not. They may come together for different meetings and stuff, but they're not. That's not how it works. Right? Like Europe is suffering right now because they thought that that's how it works. But it's not. So basically, that little explanation, there's no Illuminati because it's not needed. I mean, that's basically the conclusion I came to. You don't need a group for all of to exist for all of the stuff that is happening in society to happen. Right? You just need a couple basic principles, and in the attempt to implement those principles, that's where the destruction happens. That's where the changes happen. That's where things start going, sideways. On the day of judgment, Iblis, people he might be accused. Let's say that he'd be accused, and he would respond by saying that he did not make man do anything. He only whispered, and man did it himself. I believe one of his actual names is the one who whispers, or the whisperer, or something like that. All he does is drop just the tiniest little seed. Boop. And he knows when that seed grows, it's going to grow in a particular way because he understands human nature. So he drops the seed, and boop, he goes. I didn't make you do all that stuff. You did it yourself. We see this play out in society all the time. Right? You see it play out in your family, right? You have your children, your siblings, and they get wind of one idea. One little idea. And the next thing you know, they are just off in their own thing. Especially if it's, like a very disruptive, kind of idea, right? Like, it's a Muslim family and, the daughter comes home one day and is like, the hijab is oppressive, she says. I mean, the next few years of that family's life are going to be tumultuous. Right? And getting, changing that, like, I don't have kids, right? So I don't even know how, like, I don't know if there would be anything you could even do at that point. Like, once the seed is there, it's very difficult to get it undone, right? Usually when the seed is there, it takes societal upheaval to change it. And I mean, this is also kind of the basis of, like, Marxism, right? Society is corrupt, it can't be fixed, so we need to revolt, type of thing. So, I mean, that's pretty much my thoughts. How long has it been? Let's do this. Only 17 minutes. Well, what else can we talk about? In the same idea can be used to do good as well. Right? In Islam, we are told, we are obligated to forbid the evil and enjoin the good. Right? So you take a person who learned the obligatory knowledge. He learned everything he needs to live. And then you tell him, forbid the evil and enjoin the good. And let's just assume he has, tons of resources. The first thing he would do, the most efficient thing to do would be to build some kind of center to teach people. Right? Because it's one thing for him to go out and try to forbid the evil and join the good. No doubt. Which is another thing, or it would lead to more success if he had a school and he could train people to do that. And that would lead to the forbidding of the evil and the enjoining of the good to be much more numerous. Right? He'd have to split his time, right? Because you can't just, you build a school so that you can teach in it, so that you have students who will then teach in the school, so that they can teach students who will then teach in the school, so that they can teach students who will then teach in the school. You're not getting anywhere if you're doing that, right? At some point, everybody has to go out and actually do the teaching and actually do the dawah. So you take this person who has the obligatory knowledge, you tell them, forbid the evil and join the good. They're going to build a school. Right? Or they're gonna do something that enables them to have more people on their side, right? They're gonna proselytize. because that's the most efficient way to do it, is to spread the religion, right? Which means naturally they're going to come up with pamphlets, right? Nobody has to tell him to come up with pamphlets. He's going to do it because it's a natural and it is a useful thing to have quick offhand information that you can give to somebody. He's going to want to write things down, so books are going to be made. He's going to what else? He's going to have to interact with people, right? So he's going to have to work on his manners. His manners will improve. And all these things will happen as a result of the idea that one needs to forbid the evil and enjoin the good. It doesn't require a headquarters telling everybody what to do. You know, we tend to have organizations that have headquarters like that. Most often because there's money involved and, you know, that makes people touchy, right? So it needs to be managed in a certain way. But it's not required. You don't need a governing body, right, to tell you how to do a particular thing. It will just come naturally. Again, assuming, you know, intelligence, wisdom, resources, all that stuff. MashaAllah. I mean, this is part of why Islam spreads so far and to so many people. Nobody told, you know, the Muslims to go to all these different places and to build a specific masjid on a specific street and talk to specific people to try to do specific deals with specific tribes. Like, no, throughout most of history, it was just spread Islam. Forbid the evil and join the good. And then Muslims went to a region, conquered it, did everything they had to, and now that place is, right? And they moved on. This is also one of the things, I've contemplated doing a video on this. How long has it been? 22 minutes. I've contemplated doing a video on this. The idea that basically there cannot be peace in the abstract between Muslims and everybody else. There could be peace in the sense of, you know, instances of peace where Muslims are not fighting people, sure. But in the abstract, there's always going to be a conflict. Because Muslims are always ordered to forbid the evil and join the good. And we have our definition of what is good and what is evil. And much of the rest of the world disagrees, right? So, I mean, there you have it. You're going to always kind of have conflict. The only way that there won't be conflict is if some Muslims decide to not forbid the evil and enjoin the good. But even then, there's still going to be, as a result of that, there may not be, quote unquote, more conflict, but there will be more tragedy, right? Well, we see that play out all over the Middle East. People are not forbidding the evil and enjoining the good, and then what happens? The Wahhabis tear through a region. Right? At this point, you have generations that did not forbid the evil and enjoin the good. So when a real threat comes, people have no clue, no idea how to even recognize it, much less combat it. Right? The rest of the world plays chess with Middle Eastern pieces, and, you know, the Muslims suffer in that way because they didn't forbid the evil and enjoin the good in many different ways, and everything fell apart. Right? We have no caliph anymore. So that's what happens, right? And while there might have been more conflict, let's say more battles when there was a caliph, there was less destruction of the Muslims when there was a caliph. Because there was a caliph to defend, right? And because we had a defense, there was more fighting. I don't call the U.S. bombing the shit out of a place as combat. That's not fighting. That's to slaughter, right? The Muslims have not been fighting for 20 years in Iraq and Afghanistan. They've been getting slaughtered for 20 years in Iraq and Afghanistan, right? Some people in Afghanistan have been fighting back, but it's been mostly a slaughter. Like, it's just go in, kill everybody, don't bother taking names, right? Yeah, mashallah. So, I don't believe in conspiracies. As I said, small, companies working together to try to take over each other, like, yeah, that happens, A couple people, in the government working to do some shady stuff, yeah, that happens. But grand, epic, cabals of, people, the type of which I'm not going to mention, coming together to control everything and put us under, 1984 Orwellian style nonsense. No. All of that is way too inefficient and it is not needed. You can get the world to an Orwellian state without any of that. Just look at the policies of big tech. Facebook, Google. Like, you look at their terms of service. You look at their community guidelines and all that. They all eventually came to the same conclusions and nobody told them to. Like, there wasn't some governing body that made every company out there that has a community guidelines come to the same conclusion, right? Don't use racist slurs, right? They all chose that in and of themselves to be part of their community guidelines. Why? Because they're trying to implement the idea, the seed of, we want this to be a pleasant place to be, right? We don't want anyone to feel discriminated against, right? You implement, those ideas, and you will naturally come to the conclusion that people shouldn't be throwing around racist slurs, or, other kind of phobic slurs, or, it just comes naturally. It's not something that has to be designed. And that's kind of part of the reason why I don't feel like I don't get bummed out. Like, oh man, the Illuminati, they're controlling everything and we're just stuck. Like, no, that's not. No. Things get worse in the world because people allow it to get worse, not because there's a group making it worse. Right? We have the split between left and right in America because people have adopted and chosen to have a split between left and right. There's no, the powers that be, they're just getting you to fight each other so that they can run away with all the money. Like, no, that's not a thing. The two groups are fighting because they actively want to fight. They're choosing to fight. They each have a different seed, a different idea that they want to implement, and the implementation of both leads them to conflict. At some point, I should say, the idea of everybody should be able to do anything they want was pushed into, the left ideology, right? Like, that seed was placed there, and the left is going to do everything they can to try to implement it. Whereas on the conservative side, the idea of people should not be able to do whatever they want, that there should be limit, there should be rules, but less government regulation, interestingly enough. That was also an idea implanted at some point. There's no overlord pushing these ideas onto these two groups. They adopted them. They got them from somewhere, and the somewhere is, you know, I don't know, right? Like you would have to research. But the ideas were planted, and then the people of their own volition are trying to implement them, and they're all coming to the same conclusion. That's why there's two parties, right? It doesn't require a you know, infrastructure to maintain these two phenomena of the left versus the right. You know, I mean, and it's the same on so many other issues. You know, the Roe v. Wade stuff. You have one group that is, you know, I'm trying to explain it in a way. I mean, I'm not monetized, so I guess it doesn't matter. But you have one group who's like, it's a life, and another group who's like, it's not a life. And everything that each group is doing to try to win their side is a result just of this idea about whether a baby is alive or not. Nobody has to sit there and manage and maintain, you know, all the different things that people are going to do to try to support, you know, whatever side they're on. No, that happens with the people themselves. Someone who's on the right or someone who's on the left will get an idea, hey, this might help our cause. I'm going to do that. And then they implement it. And now there's a new thing, right? There's a new company. There's a new, you know, slogan, like whatever. There's a new thing that is in the ammunition on one of the sides that is going to be used to further the cause, right? You don't need an Illuminati. In fact, I would go so far as to say all that conspiracy stuff is just like it's how could I say? If there was an Illuminati, all the conspiracy stuff that people are into is like them getting played. Like if there was an Illuminati, they'd be sitting back laughing at you because you actually think that there's like a secret handshake, and like you actually think that there's like some esoteric symbols and all this other stuff. When like, no, that's just fringe stuff that happens to get caught up in the zeitgeist, and people are like, oh, see, look, it's, you know, bohemian, blah, blah, blah. Like, come on, dude. Like, that's not... People who really want to control the world are not going to have time for being idealistic, right? Like, if you want to control the world, that is an extremely pragmatic approach. It doesn't have room for rituals, right? It's you know, yeah. I mean, it's I don't know. It just that's my thoughts. Oh, bump the mic. That's my thoughts. It's been 33 minutes. I'm gonna end the video. So I will talk to you guys next time I talk to you. I don't know what tomorrow I'm going to talk about, but it's probably going to be something just as random. Anyways, have a good day, everyone.